Hello, everybody, and welcome into another season preview here at the Hockey Writers. I'm your host, Matthew Zator, and we are up to the Utah Mammoth in our preview series here on the YouTube channel. I've got Chase Beardsley, who has covered the Utah Mammoth, Utah Hockey Club, Arizona Coyotes throughout. They're all the same team, but they've now changed it 3 times in the last. We did a season preview with the Utah Hockey Club last season. And I'm pretty sure you were on you were on the Arizona Coyotes preview, the previous season to that. So 3 seasons, 3 teams. How's it going?
It's going good. Hopefully this one's going to stick for a while. Fingers crossed. But yeah, I'm doing good, Matthew. Thanks for asking.
For sure. Yeah, I think the Mammoth are going to be the team name now, unless that trademark thing goes, I don't know. Well, I don't think that's going to change it, but we're going to preview the Utah Mammoth 2025-26 season. Lots of changes to the forward group and the defense. They had some additions on both ends and some pretty big ones too, I would say. They're not minor additions. And of course, the Utah Mammoth were pretty close to making the playoffs last season. They were right in the mix, right to the end. I'd say maybe that losing streak was the reason they didn't make it. They could have easily made the playoffs. So they're kind of maybe exiting whatever this rebuild that they've been going through, and they've got a lot of young talent. So we're going to talk about a few of those guys, I'm sure, throughout this preview. So let's start with the forward group and the new additions there. Biggest one being JJ Peterka from the Buffalo Sabres. And then, of course, they signed Brandon Tanev in free agency. So, 2 guys that Peterka is going to be the more high-end top 6 guy, but Brandon Tanev, we've seen throughout his NHL career that he can be a difference maker as well. What do you think? We'll start with Peterka. What do you think about him being added to the forward group?
Yeah, this could be a big steal for Utah if everything pans out the way obviously they want it to. Peterka obviously coming off a really good season with Buffalo, back-to-back very good seasons. He adds to the top 6 that the Mammoth are trying to kind of hammer down. And I don't know if we're going to talk about it, but they did draft a center that they're hoping to add to that top 6 in hopefully the near future. But Peterka, great guy. He's a German forward, and that's relevant because they do have someone in their system by the name of Julian Lutz, who's actually best friends with Peterka. So it just adds to this culture that they're building that they're really happy with. They keep emphasizing it, and they're hoping Peterka can hop on board. Listen, he was on shooting percentage like crazy last year. His shooting percentage was one of the highest in the league. Obviously, that's going to come down. And being on a completely different team, surrounded by completely different people, even though, you have the likes of Logan Cooley, Dylan Gunther, all of that, who are just as talented as those guys like Tage Thompson in Buffalo. But it's going to be a big question mark heading into the season for Utah. Can Peterka kind of retain his form that he had last season? If he can, giving up just Josh Stone and Michael Kesselring, that's a pretty good deal for Utah. As of right now, obviously, if Peterka plays up to his 60, 70 point standard, that could be obviously a big factor for Utah, who had a lot of guys hit the 60-point plateau last year. And Brandon Tanev, I think a lot of people are going to overlook this signing. I think he's going to be a great part of that bottom 6. He's a gritty, speedy bottom 6 player who can chip in some offense. He's obviously on the older side. He's getting there, but he's going to add to that grittiness that Utah wants. You obviously have guys like Lawson Krause and Jack McBain down there who are going to help provide this physicality, but to protect all these young players that they have and are adding in, they need someone like Brandon Tanev who can really add to that bottom 6 forward group.
I agree. I've always liked Tanev. I think he's a good addition to any team. The Seattle Kraken, he was one of their top bottom 6 guys, and then his personality is off the charts too. And he's just a great locker room presence as well. So that's another thing that he'll bring to the team. So yeah, 2 great additions. I think they're going to bring a lot to the Mammoth coming up this season. Talking about the rest of the forward group, of course, you mentioned Logan Cooley and Dylan Guenther being the top there. So they're basically the core guys that are going to be, of course, Clayton Keller as well. That trio they're your, I want to say core 3, core 4, whatever you want to do. What do you think about storylines, burning questions going into this season for this group? I mean, they were, of course, close to the playoffs, and all of them had really good seasons. Maybe a bit up and down for Genther, I think. But what do you think about going into this season for the group, the forwards in question marks, storylines there?
I think there's a lot of storylines going into this group because this team is expected to make the playoffs. General manager Bill Armstrong put that out there over the offseason. So this is the first team that should break the little drought that they have and make it into the playoffs. So I think there's a lot of question marks. Can, like I mentioned, Peterka keep up his offense that he's had for the past couple of years in Buffalo over to Utah? And can that top six kind of mesh well with Peterka? That's a great question. I think most of your top six is solidified. Clayton Keller, 90-point season. I think he's only going to go up from there. He's in his prime right now. The fact that he's now starting to get these players that can play alongside him and have similar or better talent than he has for the first time, arguably in his career, that's impressive, and it's going to be fun to watch him play. Obviously, Dylan Guenther and Logan Cooley both hitting above the 60-point plateau last season. Can they repeat that? I can confidently say yes. I think Cooley's actually going to have a better season this year. I think this year for him is kind of establishing himself as a top two center in the league. I think there are still some questions. Can he be a top two center on team in the league? I think this is the year to prove it. Obviously, they drafted Caleb Desnoyers, who is going to be up there with him in the future. Obviously, not right now. Had wrist surgery, and also I think he's still a year or two out from coming into the NHL. So we'll see. And then Barrett Hayden obviously is an interesting one. Is he a top six player in the league? Probably not, but he's a great third line center, and when he eventually gets down there, he's going to be great. Going to the bottom six, there's a lot of questions there too. And I think the two biggest ones is one, can Lawson Krause bounce back from a disappointing 18-point season? It was probably the most disappointing and miserable season of Krause's career up to this point. I mean, this guy was coming off of a 40-plus point season, 20 goals for the third straight season as well. Can he kind of avenge himself? Because he is making north of $4 million. Can he really bounce back? Because that's a big part of Utah's offense, especially the bottom six. And then obviously Daniel Boot gets brought in during the offseason. He gets signed to his entry-level deal. Is he going to make the team? Obviously the European assignment clause kicks in next year. So if he does get assigned to the AHL, he can choose to return to the KHL, but that's next year. This season, he can be assigned to Tucson, and he doesn't he has to go there. What's going to happen there? I do think he needs some time in the AHL, but we'll see what happens. Other than that, can Jack McBain live up to his new contract? He had a great season last year. Can he do it again? I think that contract could be a steal in the future when the cap goes up. We'll see. And then obviously they add in Brandon Tanev, as we mentioned. How is he going to fit into the whole lineup? But like I said, this is the first Mammoth group that's expected to make the playoffs. I think that's a massive question surrounding the whole team. But if you look at the forward group, it is probably the best forward group they've had since starting this rebuild back in Arizona.
Yeah, I agree. And there's a lot of that young youth and speed. There's a lot of speed in that group too. So they gave a lot of teams trouble last season, and I think they're just going to continue it. We'll see where they kind of fall, but I do agree. I think they're probably set up to be one of the better forward groups that this franchise has had in a long time, and that's exciting for Mammoth fans for sure. All right, let's shift to the defense, which actually was really good last season. One group that maybe one of the strongest ones, once they were all healthy, that is. There was a lot of injuries to the top guys, but they did add a couple guys, Nate Schmidt and Scott Perunovich. Schmidt, of course, coming off the Stanley Cup win with the Florida Panthers, coming into Utah and during a lot of winning experience. And then you've got Scott Perunovich, the other end, being the really young guy, coming from the St. Louis Blues, which I thought he was going to be part of that core group going forward there, but now he's part of Utah. I mean, two different players, two different paths, really. What do you think about these two new additions?
Well, you spoke about character, and Nate Schmidt honestly is one of the most funny guys I've ever spoken to. We had a press conference with him, and he was joking about, how he's bald now and how he used to have long wavy hair and all this. And he's a great guy, and he's not going to be a top 4 defenseman. No, he's going to be a bottom pair guy, but he's going to be an anchor on that bottom pair, and he's going to provide kind of what Ian Cole provides: some veteranship presence, some good defense, not a lot of offense, but he can chip in important moments. He obviously knows what it takes to get to the Stanley Cup Finals. He did it twice in his career, including last year, winning the whole thing with Florida. So I think that's a great signing for them. I think, especially when you have younger players coming in, like Maverick Lamoureux, who impressed in his short stint last year, and Dmitry Shimashev, who got added onto the roster this past summer, who is another big question mark. He could totally mentor those guys. Scott Perunovich, I'm curious about him because over the past couple months, they did bring back their whole D line or blue line that they had last year, except Michael Kesselring, obviously, who they flipped. They re-signed also Nick DeSimone, who was their safety. So where does Perunovich fit in? He might be a great guy in Tucson. They struggled sometimes last year because their blue line was so young. So he can jump in with Kevin Connaughton in Tucson and be a factor there. And then when they run into those injuries, like you said, that was one of the things that kind of derailed their season last year. Sean Durzi was out for more than half of it. John Marino was out for more than half of it. Sergachev missed some time. Maverick Lamoureux got injured. The more defensemen, the better. So when Perunovich does get that chance, because you can never have too many defensemen, he's going to be a great guy to jump in. Obviously a younger guy. He had a decent stint with the Islanders. We'll see what he can do in Utah or Tucson.
I forgot he was traded to the Islanders for the Blues. I thought he was going to be part of the core of the Blues, so that point still stands. It was surprising that he got traded in the first place, and now he's on his third team in 2 years, which is interesting. We'll see what happens with him for sure. All right, well, the defense in general, they're a very strong group, like you said. Lots of great guys. Sergachev, of course, led the way last season and was the guy that, was with the Lightning forever. Is this group, are they still the biggest strength of the Mammoth? Or are you worried about maybe the injuries still coming in? Because, Marino's been a little bit injury prone the last few seasons. Can he stay healthy? I think that's a big thing. Durzi, I don't think he's been that injury prone. It's just this past one. But what do you think about this group in general?
I feel like, obviously the big question here is, can they all stay healthy? Because, it was hard to see everyone, healthy last year, because I don't think it happened until February, March-ish, when Durzi, Marino returned, and then everyone was fully healthy. So that is the big question. But when fully healthy, I do believe that this is one of the best blue lines in the Central Division. When you have Sergachev, Marino, Schmidt, even though you flipped out Kesselring, you still have guys like Cole in there. You still have guys, like I mentioned, Marino. You guys got guys waiting in the Tucson, like Shimashev. You got Lamoureux. You also got Artem Duda, who was really good last year. Very sneaky prospect that could, challenge for a roster spot. You got a lot of great blue liners on this team. It's just about staying healthy, and that's the whole question mark. But like I said, I think this is a very, very solid blue line when fully healthy. Even if you look to their safety, like Nick DeSimone, he had a solid season when he was forced to come into the lineup once getting claimed off waivers from New Jersey. He's a solid defenseman, and not a lot of people realize that. I think bringing in Schmidt really shores up their bottom pairing. And I think Sergachev, honestly, could be one of the best defensemen out west. He was named to the NHL Network's top 20 defensemen right now. And he was really allowed to come into his own last season after being behind guys like Victor Hedman for so long in Tampa. I think this could be another big season for Sergachev. 50 points, 50-plus points in, I believe, 70-something games. He obviously also struggled with injury. A fully healthy Sergachev, That could be very, very interesting. But yeah, I do think this is a massive strength for Utah. It's just about staying healthy.
Yeah, I mean, the depth is going to help a lot, right? Because there are going to be injuries. It always happens. Yeah, I don't think an NHL blue line has gone through a season without at least having one injury. It's very rare if it has happened. But yeah, it's something that I think they're still really strong, even if some of these guys do go out. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if everyone can stay relatively healthy this season. Now, goaltending, there are some question marks here because they got a lot of goalies. As you can see, I had to put them all in here because I'm like, Karel Vejmelka is the guy that I was completely sure. He is the starter. But you got three other guys in the mix. You got Vitek Vanacek, who they signed free agency, Jackson Stauber, who played last season, and then Connor Ingram is still up in the air, still under contract, but there's question marks with him. What do you think? I mean, Vejmelka, of course, is the solid guy there. But the goaltending situation in general, is this something that is going to be a big question going into this season?
First off, I do want to give, my thoughts out to the Ingram family and Connor Ingram. Obviously, that's tough to go through what he went through with his mother. And obviously, he's in the NHLPA Players Assistance Program. Great program. And obviously, wishing the best to him and his family. But, going off that, we have no clue when he's going to come back. We hope he comes back, obviously, because he is a great guy. And we want to obviously get through that. I think everyone does. But we have no clue when he's coming back. So then you turn your attention to Karel Vejmelka, who was absolutely outstanding last year. Incredible. Obviously, the big one was the game against Carolina, where he made nearly 50 saves against a team that Utah honestly should have lost by a couple goals against, but they managed to win that one. And from there, they just rode Vejmelka, and Vejmelka became the starter. It's funny because Ingram and Vejmelka over the past couple of years have flipped on and off about who's the better goaltender. Obviously, their last year in Arizona, Ingram was great won the Masterton. Vejmelka had a down year. The year before that, Vejmelka had a great year. Ingram was okay. And so it's going to be interesting. Can Vejmelka keep up the consistency? I think that's a massive question mark. Obviously, last year he had way more work than he's ever had in his career. After February, he was the only one who started games except for the second to last game of the season, which is impressive. So can he keep up? Can he keep that up? They brought in Vitek Vanacek for some support, but he's not a goaltender that's going to be a 1A, 1B guy. He is 100% the backup. He was in San Jose last year and didn't play a lot in Florida, where he eventually won the Stanley Cup. He's not a starter in this league as of right now. Who knows? He could surprise us. Goaltenders are random. But as of right now, he is a backup. We'll see how he plays. And obviously, if he doesn't work out, Jackson Stauber and Matt Villalta are two options in Tucson. Stauber, obviously, before getting signed by Utah last year, had great years in Chicago. He had a fantastic run with Tucson in the playoffs this past season. He was the big guy who stole game 2 from the Abbotsford Canucks and really challenged them after Matt Villalta failed to impress in game 1. But speaking about Villalta, he had a great year in Tucson up until that point too. And he looked decent in his one appearance against Nashville. Recorded his first NHL win, which is always awesome to see. Those are options, but obviously you're going to roll with Vejmelka. You don't have a really reliable backup. We'll see what Vanacek can do. But again, the big question mark, is Ingram going to return? But I think the bigger one is, can Vejmelka keep up the consistency that he had last season and bring it into this season?
Yeah, he can't have another down year. It seems like he's up, down, up, down. He can't have – I mean, he's on track as the trends go. He's going to have a bad year, but hopefully he can string together the 2 good seasons now that he's going in being the starter. He probably is the unquestioned starter right now. Unless Vanacek can somehow rediscover that early time he was in New Jersey where he did look like a starter again. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. All right, well, let's move now to the division because this division's not the strongest beyond your top. It's very top heavy. It still is. There's like 300-point teams always. You got the Dallas Stars, Colorado Avalanche, Winnipeg Jets, who won the President's Trophy this past season. You got the Minnesota Wild, who have really good last season. They're still pretty good. You've got the young teams. You got Chicago Blackhawks, who one day they'll all of a sudden figure it out, and you got Connor Bedard being a 100-point guy and all that. So where does Utah fall in this very, very top-heavy division still?
Well, you mentioned top three. I cannot see them getting past that top three. I think Dallas, Colorado, and Winnipeg are still the top three in this division. They might stack up differently in the top three, but they are the top three as of right now. I just can't see this young team beating them out for a playoff spot as of right now. So that shifts their attention to the wild card spot, and they're going to be in the mix with Minnesota and St. Louis. I think those are comparable teams to this Utah team. Again, this is the first year where they're truly expected to contend, not for a Stanley Cup, but for a playoff spot. They're really, really in the early stages of exiting the rebuild. Like, this is the first year I feel like you can say this isn't a rebuild. So we'll see what happens. I think that's where they're going to fall. They're going to fall within like the 4th, 6th spot of this division. They're going to surpass Nashville, and they're going to surpass Chicago. Those two teams are rebuilding, and they're, middling as well. So I think Utah's going to find themselves in that, 4th, 6th, spot in the division. I think if I were to guess right now, I would say they end up in the 5th spot in the division and past Minnesota. But again, that's just as right now. We're 2 months out still. Who knows? Again, they're going to also be challenging, the teams from the Pacific Division for those wild card spots, like Vancouver, Anaheim, who was, neck and neck with them as well, and even Calgary, who had a really good year last year, and we're a couple points out from Minnesota from stealing that last wild card spot, and St. Louis as well. So it should be interesting. But I do think they're going to be challenging for a wild card spot this year, and I do believe that they're going to lie within, if not in the wild card spot, just a couple points out of it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be the same type of thing as this past season, where they were right there with those teams you mentioned, right? And unless all of a sudden everything goes right and everyone pops off, which can happen. I mean, teams all of a sudden, they're like, what the heck? How are they a 100-point team now? It can happen. It'll also depend on some other teams. Of course, other teams would have to regress as well. And again, we'll see. It's a lot of stuff that can happen in the next couple months, like you said, where other teams gain some guys, lose some guys. The Wild could trade Marco Rossi. They're a weaker team because of that. I don't know. We'll have to see what happens in the rest of the offseason here. That's been very quiet, like we mentioned. All right, let's go into our quick fire. And these are all just quick 1 or 2 sentence answers or like that. You can expand a little bit. But let's start with, we talked about a lot of storylines and question marks, but what do you feel is the biggest one going into this season? Because, I mean, you mentioned some big ones in each group. But what do you feel is the biggest one?
That's a tough one because you said there were a lot. Like I said, there was a lot of question marks. Yeah. I think the biggest one and the most obvious one is, can the Mammoth make the playoffs with this young core, which once again isn't complete? They still don't have TJ Ginla, they don't have Cole Bedouin, they don't have Caleb Dinwiddie. They're all their guys that they brought in from the rebuild still aren't there. But can this early stage kind of contender, playoff contender team make the playoffs? I think it's as simple as that. Of course, you can get on all the sub questions and the milk and all that, but I think that is, as of right now, the biggest question.
Yeah, can they put it all together? Because the thing is, the rebuild, they say it's not done. There is a lot of really high-end prospects that are still not part of this core that really hasn't been established beyond the 3 guys we already mentioned. There's a few other guys that can join it. And that's going to be a big question to see who can do it. Of course, those prospects won't be part of the team this year. We might see a couple. We'll talk about them later, I'm sure. All right. Breakout stars. Now, there's a lot of guys that broke out last season and maybe the previous season before that. who do you think maybe break out more? I don't know. Whatever you want to go with this, or you can pick a guy that maybe hasn't broken out yet. I think a lot of their top guys have at some point, but who do you fall in this category?
That's a tough one because, as you mentioned, you saw the Gunther Cooley, breakout last year. You saw Peterka in Buffalo the past 2 years. So if I had to choose someone, shoot. See, that's tough, right?
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna have to go with Kirill Vejmelka. I think he's gonna pop off even more this year. I think with a better defense and a fully healthy defense in front of him, he's not going to have to make a lot more saves like he did last year. And I think his save percentage and his stats are going to go up because of that. So if I had to choose someone, I would choose Kirill Vejmelka.
Yeah, I don't think he really broken out as a big breakout. He's had good seasons and good stretches, but to have a really great full season where I'm making the playoffs and leading a team to the playoffs, I think would be a breakout season for him. So yeah, I think that's a good one. Right, other side. Now there's a few guys you can probably go with, players that need to bounce back. You mentioned a couple in the forward group. I can probably guess which one you're going to pick, but who needs to bounce back the most?
Hands down, Lawson Krause.
Yeah, I knew it. That's where I was going to go.
There's no doubt about it. 18 points is not good for a $4 million player. That's just not acceptable. He's one of the leaders in the locker room. This guy's expected to score at least 20 goals, if not, around 40 points per season. He's paid like that. He built up to that with his, 3 seasons prior to this one. He needs to bounce back. Otherwise, he could really look like someone they could ship out in the near future.
Yeah, I thought that's the guy you were going to say. 18 points is not good for a $4 million guy. He needs to definitely show back to why they signed him to that contract. And he's shown he can. I mean, he has produced in the NHL before, so it's not like he can't do it. So we'll see if he can bounce back. All right, potential X factors. This doesn't have to be a player. It can be a situation. Anything you want to kind of go with this. What do you think potential X factors this season?
I think, it's a tough one. I think, obviously JJ Peterka and, kind of bringing over his game from Buffalo, maybe even expanding on it, is a big X factor, and that could really flourish the top 6. I think, having a strong start to the season never hurts. But I think also being consistent throughout the season, I think that's something this team has struggled with even before they got to Utah. When they were in Arizona, they would have just these long losing streaks. In Arizona, it was 18. Last year, I don't know if it hit double digits, but it was around there. And they would just play very, very inconsistent until probably the second half of the season. But you have to have a strong first half as well. If not, you have to have a decent one. And the Mammoth did not have that last season. So being consistently good in both halves of the season, I think, is a huge X factor that maybe not a lot of people will think of, but that is something they need to improve on.
Yeah, they got to stop being the roller coaster. They got to stay relatively even. And they have had great stretches where they're like, this is the team you need to be all season. And if they are, they're a playoff team. And last season, I think you take away maybe a week of bad games, they're in the playoffs. So and that was how close it really was. That's a huge X factor for sure. All right, let's shift to the many prospects that Utah Mammoth have. Who do you see as a surprise that could maybe make the roster that no one really sees as being a possibility right now?
I think right now 2 players. I think the big one is Cole Bedouin. He had an excellent season last year with the Barrie Colts. I think, he's really going to challenge for that spot. He's a very mature player, both on and off the ice. He looked good in development camp as well, which, isn't a massive, someone's going to make the team because of a good development camp, but it is a telling sign. And Cole Bedouin looked a lot better in this year's development camp than the last year's. I think he could easily slot in as a 3rd line, 4th line center and really thrive in that role. He's a very good two-way player that Utah is going to really benefit from. I just think he's very mature for his age, which helps this case a lot. I think he is the prospect as of right now that could challenge for a spot. There are obviously obvious ones like Dmitry Shimashev, but I do think that top six is really crowded right now. TJ Ginla is another one. He looked good after having, some really bad surgeries, over the past year in development camp. But would another year in the WHL help him? I think so. And obviously Caleb Denwye with the wrist injuries, he's probably going to go back to Moncton or if he goes to the NCAA. So I'm going to have to go Cole Bedouin, but I'm also going to shoot in Artem Duda to make his NHL, debut, I think. I don't think he's played in the NHL yet, but strong year for Tucson last year. If Utah suffers a lot of injuries once again on the blue line, he could be an early call-up because he has grown into a really solid blue line prospect. And, it sounds like the Mammoth are really high on him too. He played well in the playoffs, which not a lot of road runners did. So I think he could challenge for not a permanent spot, but I think he could challenge for a game or two, especially if the team locks up a playoff spot early. But I think Cole Bedouin is the main answer here.
I think so too. And I think the opportunities for sure is more in that bottom six, while the blue line, we already talked about their depth. It's going to be really tough for a young guy to crack that lineup unless there's injuries, which fingers crossed there isn't, because you want all those guys in the lineup. But they do have a lot of depth, and those prospects are going to get a chance if something happens. And I'd say he's probably going to play a game or a few games, but probably won't be coming off as a regular this season at least. All right, we mentioned a few prospects, but otherwise, any other prospects everyone should be watching that probably won't make the team, but there are a lot of guys that you can watch from this pipeline. But who do you think everyone should be looking at?
I think there's a couple, and there's a lot of obvious ones. Obviously, Shimashev and Boot. I think they spend some time in the AHL, so that's always good to watch out for. And they'll be playing with some good guys down there, so we'll see how that pans out. Obviously, the latest draft pick, Caleb Denwye, when he comes back from injury, how he's going to play after wrist surgery. I think, obviously, TJ Ginla, coming back into the WHL for the first time in almost a year after his injury, that's going to be interesting. But in terms of some, lesser known names, I think Maximilian Zuber in Tucson is going to be an interesting one. And Julian Lutz, who I mentioned, a couple minutes ago, a friend of Sergachev. I think he had a better half of the second part of the AHL season than the first half. He was not that great in the first half. I think he could be someone to watch out for in this year's AHL season, just because I thought he had a strong second half of the season. It was his first pro season. So, having all those jitters behind, maybe a second season in the AHL. And I think it's going to be a more improved Tucson team, should be someone to keep an eye out for sure. And then also Maverick Lamoureux. I forgot to throw him in with all the big name prospects, but obviously he's someone to watch out for.
Yeah, he had that good stretch in the NHL there when he came up. So then the injury, which of course didn't help him. So I think that's a guy to watch for sure. Even maybe getting some NHL games again this season too. All right, this is a very quick one because I'm sure these are probably obvious ones, but there's some teams that are very obvious in this question. But who's leading the team in scoring? I mean, in the forward group, there might be three guys that could maybe jostle, but who do you see?
I still think it's Clayton Keller on the forward group. I do believe he can hit 100 points this season. Again, much more improved team. This team is, again, poised to and expected to make the playoffs. I think with that expectation on him, he just keeps improving every year. He's in his prime. I think it will be Keller. But I do think, like I said before, Gunther and Cooley are going to be pretty solid players going this season. But I do think it's going to be Keller in the forward group. Defense, though, I think it could be a flip. I think it's going to be Sergachev, but a fully healthy Sean Durzi might surprise a lot of people. He had a great year in his first year in Arizona. I think if he's fully healthy this whole season, and all of his partners are too, I think he could surprise some people. But I'm gonna have to go with the obvious ones, Keller and Sergachev.
Yeah. I agree. I think Sergachev's probably gonna do it, but I mean Durzi has shown he can put up points too, so he could maybe sneak in there. But I think Sergachev is a good answer for sure. All right, let's finish the preview with I love the bold predictions. So let's get one. A bold prediction or a hot take for this season?
I don't know what I said last year. I think it had to do something with the playoffs. I do think they're actually going to challenge for a spot this year, kind of like they did last year, and I wouldn't be surprised if they make it into that last wild card spot. I'm going to try to go outside of that. I'm gonna say, I think Cole Bedouin makes this team out of training camp. That might be a somewhat boldish take, but I'm gonna have to go with that one just because watching this guy in person back in July, back in development camp, and just talking to him, he's a very confident guy, and I think he's a guy who can really will himself into a roster spot, and he just seems like an Andre Tourney type of player. He's very good at both aspects of the game. He can be a great scorer, but he can also be a great physical presence who can provide a great defensive presence as well. I'm going to have to go with that. And then I'll go with a lighter take. Clayton Keller hits 100 points just because I do think that will happen. Maybe that's a hottish take, but yeah.
Well, I mean, he had 90 points, right? Last season. 10 more points is not out of the question. I think he can hit 100. And that would also mean Cooley and Genther are also getting more points, which is also a good thing. So, yeah, I think Keller, that's a good prediction. I don't think that's a very bold prediction either. I think that's something that can definitely happen this season, him getting 100 points. And, yeah, the Mammoth are exciting. I think they're a very exciting team coming up, not just this season, but in the future, because they got a lot of great prospects that I think will hit and make this team a very tough team to play against all the time. And I think the rebuilding team that you always play against are like, oh, we're going to beat them easily. Those days are done. I think they're a very tough team to play. And I saw that with the Canucks. They didn't beat them last season. So wait, I think they beat them in overtime once.
They might have, but those games were intense. I remember that. I remember that. But you did mention this isn't the team that the teams are going to come in and be like, oh, let's get some points against them. This is a team that has really improved in so many ways ever since coming to Utah, and this is really the first offseason where they've added relevant players, not just taking on their contracts, but adding them to be contenders. And you saw the Peterka trade, and I mean, you had the Sergachev Marino trades last year, but that's a big trade. That's a trade, a team that is trying to get into a playoff spot makes. I think that's a big difference from maybe 2 years ago when we talked about this team in its final year in Arizona as a team that was still rebuilding and teams still expected to beat every night. This team is a feisty team. They're a hard beat. You saw that last year. You mentioned the Canucks, but this team beat Winnipeg a couple times too, and they were the President's Trophy champion. So this is a good team. This is forming into a team that isn't a joke anymore. This is a serious team.
Yeah, and we saw in free agency. Free agents want to come to Utah, which is a big thing too. They're no longer a contract dump where teams just say, "Here, have our contracts." That's it. I think that they're a very good team. So it's very exciting, especially with being a new team in the NHL too. So we'll watch the Utah Mammoth, and we'll definitely have a season preview next year with the Mammoth, not another team. I'm sure we're not gonna have a fourth year with a different team. But yeah, thanks Chase for coming on and previewing the Mammoth. Make sure checking out everything at thehockeyrush.com. Chase has got tons of content out there right now. He's been doing the report cards all throughout the season. So check those out if you haven't already, and everything else that's going to be coming throughout the season. He is, of course, our boots on the ground for Utah. He is he is our credentialed writer. So make sure you're reading all his stuff. And of course, check out all the other previews if you want over at the Hawk Riders YouTube channel and our Substack newsletters, which come out. I mean, you can get one every day. Not every team has one every day, but you can get one every day. So check all that out. But until our next preview, we will see you next time.